Oh, hi there everyone, and welcome to our Immersive Arts and Mental Wellbeing event that is presented by Immerse UK and our partners at Barclays Eagle Labs Health Team. My name is Sarah Ticho and I'll be hosting this evening, but we're joined by some really wonderful panellists that are going to be giving presentations about their work. So that includes Rosie Collins from the Fred Company, Matteo Merla, who's an art therapist, and Jed Walls, who's joining us all the way from New Orleans, our most international guest yet. He's a new media art therapist. So just a little bit about me. I have a few different hats. So I'm the healthcare lead predominantly with Immerse UK and support on initiatives like this and how to sort of develop the community around immersive arts and healthcare. I also run my own company, Hatsumi, which is an adaptation of an existing arts and health research method known as body mapping. And I also work on another project called Deep, which is a breath-controlled virtual reality experience to help people manage anxiety. So Immerse UK is an organisation that's been running for quite a few years now that really works to support this collaboration between businesses, academia, and artists across the UK, and been doing some really fantastic work. I've been working with them for the last 2 years now, and we've been doing loads of exploring the world of virtual reality and health. So within that time, we've run 2 conferences with the Institution of Engineering. We've been running this touring series with Barclays Eagle Labs. And so we've done 8 nationwide so far, and this is our first digital one, which is rather exciting. We've been running innovation sprints as well, thinking about how we can bring together games designers and healthcare specialists to imagine the future of VR in healthcare, running roundtable discussions, and we've just released a white paper as well with the IET exploring the potential of virtual reality in healthcare and how we can really progress this forward. So it's a really wonderful organisation to really gain some support. I know that my business has really benefited from it as well. So Immerse UK now is a members-based organisation, and so the annual memberships start at £99 plus VAT. So if you are interested, then please do look us up. So with that, I will pass over to our wonderful partner at Barclays Eagle Labs, Jen Esterby.
Hi everyone, thank you Sarah. Hi, so I'm Jen Esterby. I'm the health tech lead at Barclays Eagle Labs. For those of you that don't know, we're a growing number of Eagle Lab incubators across the UK. And our main focus really is to help accelerate startup businesses to scale and to grow by kind of promoting collaboration across our ecosystems and really enabling access to innovation and new and emerging technologies. So we've been going now for about 4.5 years. Obviously, as I'm sure you can imagine, with recent times, as we're all on a virtual event rather than a face-to-face, we've temporarily sort of closed our physical network of 24 sites for the time being, just to make sure that we keep both our members and our colleagues safe. But we're still very much continuing to support our members online and virtually. So we've got our support hub, which I will send the link out later on after today's event. But just to give you a bit of an overview on the sort of spread of what we do within Eagle Labs. Sarah, if you could just flick to the next slide for me. Here we go. So so our reach is far more than just our physical networks. We have got a number of industry sectors that we specifically look at. So traditionally, when we launched the proposition a few years ago, we were just very much interested in supporting businesses, which traditionally were more tech businesses, but over the last few years, we've looked at particular industry sectors that we felt were ripe for disruption, or that there was more startups emerging and more investment becoming available in those particular sectors. So on the screen here, you'll see 5 that are listed. So agri-tech, energy tech, game tech, law tech, and health tech, which is what I lead. Across our network, we've got over 500 resident businesses, a number of co-workers, and we really support them by connecting them to investors and access to mentorship with over 38 of our innovation partners. So with regards to the health tech side of things, I've been looking after that for the last couple of years. And we've connected with a number of industry partners, including the likes of UCL and obviously Immerse UK, running a couple of accelerator programs to obviously give those health tech businesses access to the community, to academic expertise, to stakeholders all across the healthcare sector. And as Sarah mentioned, last year we partnered with Immerse UK to really look at delivering a host of events to promote various technologies, and in particular obviously VR and AR technologies. So it's great to obviously be on this event today. I know we've got some great speakers, which I won't keep up much more of your time talking myself, because they're going to be speaking about far more interesting things. But if anyone wants to know anything about Eagle Labs in general or our support hub, please obviously get in touch. We've also recently launched our health tech response to COVID-19, so we are looking to speak with businesses that perhaps might have an idea of solution to help solve a number of challenges emerging from the pandemic. So we can obviously have a Q&A session later on, but please feel free to reach out directly to me if you have any questions. Am I back to you, Sarah?
Oh, right, just unmuting myself. Lovely, thank you so much, Jen. So with that, so we're breaking this down into about 3 different sections where we'll be presenting, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end. So the first part, Rosie and myself are going to be talking about the role of arts in therapy and health. But first I thought, Rosie, this would be a nice opportunity for you to introduce yourself and talk about all the brilliant things you're doing.
So I'm Rosie Collins. This is Fred, who has just emerged at just the right moment, who the company is named after. So we're a production company / research studio, and we basically partner with organisations to look at innovative ways to use technology, particularly immersive technology, to help with engagement. So that might be organisations like the NHS we've been partnered with for a couple of years now, particularly with the Grenfell Health and Wellbeing Service. And we've also been working a lot with the Children's Society on using VR as a way to mitigate anxiety issues, and various other organisations along those lines, as well as doing more commercial work. The picture on the screen there is a slightly silly one, but it kind of explains slightly the difference in the company. We've got our studio, which is the slightly more serious approach to things, and then the lab, which is kind of our own research that we do that might be looking at the effect of chilies on your libido, or it might be laughter yoga and why that's good for you. And so that's probably enough on me. I think we're going to just do a little bit of an overview. I mean, it's such a huge topic. There's no way we can possibly touch everything at all. So we're going to just go through some main things Sarah's going to talk about, and then I'm going to talk about a few projects which are kind of relevant, I think, as an interesting overview of a few of the different things people are doing around the world using VR.
Sounds great. And it just dawned on me as well that Rosie and I met just over a year ago when I was doing a research project with an organisation called Nesta about the role of the arts and creative practice in virtual reality for mental health. So it's actually very nice that it feels like all of this is actually coming full circle in some ways. And yeah, and I think learned a lot in that time as well of just all the different fascinating things that people are doing. And I think to begin with, I think it's important to distinguish the different ways that arts can be used in health. So Matteo and Jed are art therapists, but actually there are lots of different ways that arts can be applied in health. So there is art therapy, which you train as an art therapist for, and they'll be able to share a bit more about the details of that later. And then there's arts in health, which is looking at all the different ways that arts can improve well-being. So that can be things from singing to learning new skills, and how it can affect you on a psychological, behavioural, even like biological level to improve health outcomes. And then there's art about health and well-being. So that can be educating you on how the body works, how the brain works, and using that as a tool to be able to support your own well-being as well. But there's a scholar called Theodore Zeldin, who's based at Oxford, that made this very grand statement about what art is, and said that art is our new religion and museums are our cathedrals. And I've been really thinking about this a lot recently and what that really means. I think that actually as a whole, art really fills this space where we can talk about vulnerability, dignity. Is a place that we can go for consolidation, and explore meaning when in our day-to-day lives and our work, then that's not always the case, and we get stuck down into the day-to-day. And it's a place where we can experience culture together and think about things like hope, and also reclaim our suffering through making art, and really channeling that in new ways. I think especially with COVID as well, I think the arts has been such an important role for everyone, because I think everyone at home is, you know, starting new projects, watching a lot of Netflix, you know, getting involved in a lot of new things. And I think it's a real opportunity for us to think about actually how can we use these things in ways that really help us. And I think it's also important to distinguish that games are art as well. Games have also often gotten a very bad rap for being addictive or dangerous, but actually there's a lot of fantastic work that shows that VR as well as games in general is actually now one of the biggest cultural mediums in the world. Games especially are worth more than TV, film and music combined, and so I think it's really time that we start to take that seriously. So I think what we're going to do now is a little bit of a whistle-stop tour of interesting examples of projects that people do specifically in virtual reality to help well-being. Shall I cover this bit? So I think one a way of exploring this is looking at the 5 different ways to well-being. So this is something that the Mental Health Foundation created, which is looking at how we can connect with other people, how being active and exercise is really important, taking notice, things like practicing mindfulness, learning new things, and also giving and being part of a community. And so a lot of these examples that we'll share will be reflecting these sort of 5 different ways to well-being. Rosie, over to you.
Okay, so I know that this was in theory is about mental well-being, but I think all of us very much believe in the holistic nature of physical and mental health all being intrinsically linked. And it's just a very interesting example of games and VR being used for very positive uses. So this is a screenshot here from Impact VR, which is a chap called Ivan Phelan, who's based up at Sheffield Hallam University. And he is a research associate games developer, I think is the full title. And basically he does very quick prototypes of gaming environments, game experiences like this with specific uses. So that's things from diversion during surgery. So finding ways to use VR and other immersive tech to reduce the need for anesthesia, that's the right, and opioids. A lot to do with physical rehab, which is traditionally can be very hard to get people to stick to their rehab routines. And there's a ton of evidence showing if you gamify that, people will engage with it much better, which I think is key to a lot of the stuff we're talking about today. Is the first step very often with engaging people can be the hard part of the process, is just to get them in the room in the first place. So meeting them on their own terms, providing a more gamified interactive version of it, brings them in the first place. It means people will stick with it. And it means you can have very, very bespoke experiences. So for example, Ivan had done one with a particular child. I don't know the exact issue he was dealing with, but he needed to be able to improve his range of movement in his shoulder. So he designed a game where the child had to play with bow and arrow, and it involved him reaching behind his pack in a virtual reality experience and pulling the bow out and doing this. And you notice, because it's linked in with pain reduction as well, quite often people who are doing their physical rehab will find themselves holding back because they're anticipating a particular move or a particular range of movement is going to be painful. But you find when people are in a VR headset, they're distracted so much that range actually opens up quite a lot, and they almost don't even notice that they're doing the exercises. It's the equivalent of putting vegetables blended up in your pasta sauce and squeezing in that way. But even when people know that this is what is happening, it still works. You know, it's an incredibly impactful thing. It encourages people to take part in the first place and motivates them to carry on with that work. Can we move on to the next one?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to add to that very quickly as well, I think this is a really rare example of a healthcare application where they've really worked with game designers that have spent a lot of time on that visual design. And by making something that is really visually appealing, then of course people want to play more of it as well. And thinking about how, yeah, healthcare professionals and academics start to work with artists as well, not to just make like the most basic experience, but something that is really visually compelling, can definitely be far more effective. And then also talking about, you know, social connection and how we can connect with people at the moment, because, you know, there's so many experiences that are being taken away from us and down. And I think that there are a variety of social virtual reality experiences that are now currently available. I think there's more than 10 different examples, but I think some very popular ones, things like this one at the bottom called Alt Space. We've hosted events in there, and it's been a really great place to meet people. There are meditation meetups in there, artists that gather together, comedy nights, poetry readings, and you can just meet people from all over the world, which is has been a really wonderful experience. Then there are creative projects like Half and Half as well, where you can play games together with your friends. You can play hide and seek in these sort of magical worlds, and you can high five each other, and it makes these lovely sort of sounds as you touch hands. And I think when we're also starved of human connection, this is almost the closest thing that you can have. And I think lots of us have really found the benefits of that in just feeling less alone during lockdown. Another really wonderful example of a project that's actually an art space project that has quite clear health applications is something called Where Thoughts Go. So this was developed solely by one person, which is incredibly impressive considering how big lots of game studios and design studios are. And so Where Thoughts Go is an experience where you get confronted by, you go into this magical world and you're confronted by different questions. So it will start with something like, what did you always want to be when you grew up? And then it'll become more and more sort of intense questions to what would you do if you had a year left to live? And what happens is you whisper these stories into your hands and then you release them into the world. But these little heads that you see, these are different people that have gone through the experience as well. And so you can hear about other people's lives and stories. And I think in the research that I mentioned that I did last year, it was really interesting to observe this spectrum of people that are operating in this space. And you do have the academics and the clinicians that are grounding things in existing or grounding projects and existing ideas. But actually there are artists that are developing things because they want to, because they're really interested and excited by it. And then people go, oh, I actually really see the health applications of this, and this could be used in therapy. And he said that there were war veterans that came to him and said that they'd never actually opened up about their experiences, and this was probably one of the first times that they did talk about some of the experiences they've had and have now gone to seek help from it. And so I think it's important for people to, look beyond their ivory towers and see what's out there, and how to help people maybe even explore how this could be brought to a healthcare environment, because lots of artists say, well, I just don't know how, how do you speak to the NHS, or how do you get funding for that? So I think making these opportunities clearer and developing more opportunities where you can bring together artists and clinicians is extremely important.
I think that's a very good point Sarah makes, is just the using of these different engagement tools, whatever they are just, they're a different tool. And I think that's the thing that sometimes maybe people who are a little bit older, who've been in their clinical jobs for a bit longer, kind of seem to sometimes expect that when you're coming and talking about this, that you're wanting to replace traditional therapies. And obviously that's not the case. It's just, it's another way that works really well to start those conversations and to open people up. And it's linked in a lot with awe and wonder. If you look up any scientific literature on the value of experiencing awe and wonder, I mean, you can replace all of that with VR and immersive tech because of the way that people will respond to that. And that sharing of that experience with somebody else is an incredibly powerful bonding experience. And as I'm sure Matteo will probably talk about later, part of that relationship between the therapist and the person they're working with, huge part of that is building up trust. So it might be weeks and weeks and weeks before you actually get into talking about the specific issue that you might be dealing with that person. But playing games and doing art together helps you to build that trust. And so VR is sort of another element in that. What we've got here is a brilliant woman she's based in Colorado in the States, called Dr. Jessica Stone. She's a psychologist and does a lot with play therapy. And so in her day-to-day practice, she will use anything from virtual reality headsets to board games to anything at all that seems like it will work with that particular individual that she knows is going to engage them and interest them, because she knows that's the most likely way she's going to be able to actually work closely with them and help. So we got to see here is virtual sand tray, which is an iPad app, so sand tray is an actual physical thing that people will do as part of play therapy. And they've converted that into an iPad app. So this can be used by therapists wherever, and obviously it doesn't have the mess of sand and all the issues that might go along with that. She actually told me the other day a really interesting story about how she was using a Nintendo Switch with a particular client who was he had selective mutism. He would only speak out loud to his direct family, his immediate family, not even cousins and things. And she'd been working with him for quite a while and nothing had been getting through. He wasn't responding to her, but she knew that he was really into playing Zelda on the Nintendo Switch. So she offered up to him during one of their sessions that they could play on a Switch together, but they would have to have one controller each. So I don't know if you know how a Switch works, but it basically has a screen and the two different controllers which do different things. And she knew that that would encourage him to basically have to find a way to communicate with her, because otherwise the game was not going to work. And she said they played it a bit together for a while. He would use the controller to move and she would use the controller to look, to tell the direction. And she said after a while, he just got so frustrated with the fact that she was getting it wrong and it wasn't going where he wanted, that he just shouted out, "Can you just please look over there?" or something to that effect. And it was like this sort of thing where this is quite a breakthrough, but it was the fact that she'd gone on his terms, something that he actually wanted to engage with. And it's that ability to kind of find within all of these different things we're talking about, whether this is virtual reality and the thousands of different things you can do within virtual reality, to regular games, to the more traditional art therapy that might involve kind of pens and paper and those things that you might more immediately think of. It's the possibility of offering literally anything. So you can really work with the individual to find the thing that works for them, to prompt those conversations and help you to work through it. And this last one, this is some of the work we've been doing over with the NHS down at Grenfell with the community by the fire. So we worked using VR as an engagement tool. It was quite hard for the staff over there to engage with the local community after the fire. So at the most basic level, we knew that if we put VR in places, people would come there and they would play with the VR. And unsurprisingly, that was the case. But then obviously over time, we were looking at the different ways that we could use this in a more formal way. And we ended up doing some wellbeing sessions for the staff at Grenfell, because unsurprisingly, they all actually had a very hard job and it was quite stressful. So we set up a sort of wellbeing space within the staff area, and people could come in and do 10 minutes on Nature Treks VR, which is basically a way to have different virtual nature experiences. Like you can see here, waterfalls, oceans, white winter, there's snowy things around you. All the staff, unsurprisingly, loved that. We did some measures before and after around their well-being. Every measure you could want went the way that you would want it to go. So you would have increases in hope, increases in feeling rested, decreases in sadness and stress, reduced heart rate, all of this within a 10-minute session. And pretty much without fail, every single person said they would like to do it again, and this was a really useful thing to do in their workday. And so we're really interested in the staff wellbeing side of this as well, not only with the NHS, but everybody right now. Everybody really, really needs to take care of their staff's wellbeing in a way that they haven't probably considered before. I think a lot of people think staff wellbeing is running a seminar once a month about mental health, which at the best of times doesn't cut it. And I think even more so now, we really need to be proactively putting in measures that are really going to, like, genuinely going to support people. So I will, I think, move on to Sarah now.
Cool. Yeah, sorry, I'm just conscious of time, so I just get through. This is our last slide anyway. And then just also exploring like the potential of creativity in virtual reality as well. So there are a host of different 3D drawing experiences out there. I think Tilt Brush by Google is probably one of the most well-known ones, and there's a whole host of different artists that are using Tilt Brush and making incredible experiences and artworks at the moment. During COVID as well, I've been seeing loads of artists selling their artworks on the blockchain as well, and it's great to see artists actually paid for the incredible work that they're doing. This image in the bottom left is an experiment I did following meeting someone from Brighton University Arts and Wellbeing Department. called Philippa Leon, who introduced me to Feldenkrais, which is this idea of how you can like illustrate the feelings within your body. And so you have to close your eyes and draw around your hand and just start to think about how you interpret the sensations of your body in a new way. So this is yeah, what I did is, in Tilt Brush with that. And then very briefly, my company, then we've been creating this adaptation of body mapping, which in some ways has lots of overlap. So what you do traditionally is you trace around your body on a large piece of paper, and you start to think, what does it feel like living with anxiety, for example? Like, do you feel sick in your stomach? Does your face go really red? Do you get shaky hands? And what does that look like in your body? And what sort of colors or words do you associate with it? And so you slowly build up this artwork that can be really helpful for communicating how you feel when perhaps like words aren't enough. So we've been looking at how that can help patient-doctor communication, especially people living with chronic pain, where, you know, the scale of 1 to 10 just isn't enough to really understand how people are feeling. But also how this could potentially be used in treatment, but also research as well. Through being able to digitize artwork, then you can start to perhaps think about how you can analyze them and understand them in different ways. And so with that, I think that I will wrap up there and pass on to our next speaker, Matteo Merla, who's an art therapist with Grenfell. And yeah, if you'd like
Hello.
to share all the lovely things you've been doing.
Thank you, Sarah, and everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Matteo, and I've been working as an art psychotherapist for about 6 years now. And this presentation is about actually my experience of using VR, more like as a well-being practitioner. But I was also hoping to talk a little bit about art therapy itself and the different uses, also because there are still some misconceptions about the profession. So as an art therapist, I've got some experience working mental health in inpatient wards, and I've also been working with people experiencing PTSD, and as well with traumatized communities. And my experience began quite a few years ago when I was working as a social practitioner, mainly in Israel and Palestine. And then I was invited as an artist to facilitate creative workshops in community centers, hospital, orphanage, and also end-of-life care and so on. And I wanted to say that one of the first things that I discovered was basically the positive impact of creativity and the creative process in the recovery journey, recovering from a trauma, which of course can be both psychological and physical. So when we think about distraction, for example, when like everything feels like a big ground zero, if you want, which is often the case with war and conflicts, but also with traumatic events. Then if you think about the source of distraction, to me, a creative response is the only one who makes sense to rebuild. So a creative journey where one can actually begin to reimagine and rediscover and rebuild and actually finally heal through almost like reauthoring their story in their own way, with their own words. And if actually we put also the culture into the mixer, then art, if you want, is a universal means that can express emotion and some feelings that not all languages and cultures can actually put into words. So in art therapy, we use art materials and images in different ways. So according to the setting where a therapist works. So art therapy is a healthcare professional, a regulated profession. And so we have to practice according to a specific guidelines and also clinical evidence. This means that basically the type of art therapy intervention that we offer needs to be well proven to be effective through usually clinical trials and research. And this is ultimately to keep our clients safe. For example, if I work with severe mental health issues such as schizophrenia, for example, where a person is experiencing a distorted reality, and also difficulties in to relate with others and with perhaps himself. So art making, if it's done with a trained therapist, then becomes a very concrete and very real and tangible experience, which of course includes the art making and the mess a little bit, but also includes touching, smells, sight, exploring, playing, and hopefully in the end a discussion around the images that are used. So the image somehow becomes a container, almost a holder of in this case, a psychotic experience, where actually elements of the pathology began to emerge in the images. So this, for example, if you can imagine a random few lines on a piece of paper done in a session, for example, these images can just be simple as this, but it tells us at least some aspect of the drawer experience of being in therapy, especially. So it's important.
Matteo, I just wanted
Yeah.
to check if you're sharing slides or not, because we can't see.
No, I
Okay.
don't share any slides. No, that's okay. That's okay. So yeah, we were talking about this line. So in the beginning, it would be very important for an art therapist to keep a very concrete discussion about the image, such as, how many are these lines? Let's see where these lines are on the paper. What color are these lines? Which helps to actually generate a sense of safety and also allows play and imagination in the room. After, once the clients feel safe and ready, perhaps it's possible to explore a more symbolic meaning emerging in the images. For instance, if we think about these disconnected lines we were talking about before, a therapist might ask, is it possible that you are experiencing the same sort of disconnection? Or how would these lines look like if they were more connected? Or even question like, can you please make another image based on this answer that we just discussed? So it is quite of a long process, but it's actually, I witnessed many positive outcomes from my sessions. So now working with people suffering from trauma and PTSD is actually very different. I don't know how many of you are familiar, but PTSD, one of the main symptoms is to re-experiencing the event. So this is when a person relieves the traumatic event in form of flashback, nightmares, or distressing images, or even physical pain. And some people have even constant intrusive negative thoughts about their experience. For example, they might ask, starting themselves, why this event happened to me? Could I have done anything to prevent it? Which actually leads someone to feel quite guilt and shame. So another key symptoms is try to avoid being reminded of the traumatic event, which usually means to avoiding talking to some people or going to certain places, which reminds of the trauma, and even talking to anyone about this experience, which actually lead the person becoming isolated and withdrawn, and the person may give up activities, who used to enjoy. And in case of collective traumas, actually we can experience a loss of trust in institutions, such as the governments or even healthcare providers. And this aspect makes actually our works as a therapist particularly difficult, as often people do not want to engage with us, with professionals, because of the reason we just discussed. Guidelines to work with PTSD in here do not include art therapy yet, unfortunately, but although there is more new research suggesting the benefit of this intervention. And this means that art therapy cannot be used to treat PTSD. However, it can be very effective, firstly as an engagement tool, as Rosie was talking about, and Sarah, but also as a psychoeducation tool to help actually people to understand the impact of trauma on themselves. But more important, which the aspect I want to focus is the the grounding and stabilization properties of art making and creative intervention, which helps to create a sense of safety and trust, which are the first to go away when trauma happens. And all this helps to prepare almost the person to go in a stage which is more calm, more grounded, and to engage in a more trauma-focused therapy, such as EMDR, for example, which is evidence-based. So in this case, art therapy can also be used in a community intervention, especially in engaging people and start to think about their well-being. And for instance, I've facilitated many creative workshops which have actually included VR as an engagement tool. I actually personally started to explore VR as a potential tool to engage with community. But also, we experimented use it as a well-being tool, as Rosie was saying, for staff working with trauma. So finding a way to relax and to have a break can be quite difficult. And although it's a very massively rewarding job, one can sometimes feel drained. And I remember the first time I tried the Oculus Quest, and I was struck mostly because it wasn't just about sight, it was almost all my senses were involved, and I really felt blasted with energy. It was really powerful. And as I mentioned before, my priority is the safety when I work with clients. So there were a number of issues to consider before I actually could start to work using VR. And I'm talking about certain diagnoses, for instance, for example, which I would not recommend the use of VR, like epilepsy or brain injuries or psychosis. But the second important thing is to think about, for a therapist, to think about the use of VR with trauma. So it is an engagement opportunity or is a therapeutic addition. So this helps also to set the framework of our work in a sense. Another important aspect is to think about setting up, so make sure that there are no environmental risks, hazards like water or small spaces or crowded spaces. I mean, these VR experiences are designed to support the user in feeling calmer and more grounded, and are particularly helpful for people who are experiencing anxiety. I generally give 10 minutes warm up of a VR experience before the therapy, and the person, of course, is free to choose from several VR experiences. And these are mostly mindfulness exercises or relaxation techniques. So they do not include much action and can be done in a chair. So when the person has finished, I try to explore how the experience made them feel, or anything they found surprising, or anything it reminded them of something. I then use this as an opportunity to reflect with them how the techniques that they saw in the video can be used in real life to help look after their well-being. And I can ask them if they would like to discuss the kinds of support available or other interventions. So it's open up all sorts of conversation. On a later stage, I also discovered VR as an artistic medium, thanks to Fred and Rosie, of course, and using this amazing app, which Sarah was saying, which is Tilt Brush. So I had lots of fun, and I began actually to question if and how I could use this in my art therapy sessions, which however is quite a relatively new medium, and we are still in the process of research, but many positive steps have been done, and there is a growing worldwide research which actually points out the benefit of VR and art therapy, as I presume Jed will say a little bit more about with his important work. And anyway, since then, with the help of Fred, we created and co-produced a number of successful projects using VR and art, and some of them includes engaging with younger people with antisocial behavior, and I wouldn't possible without VR to succeed in such a project. So I want to say thank you to Rosie and Fred and the VR, and for make this piece of work possible and for the future opportunities. And with this, I ended my presentation. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to pass it on to Jade.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Matteo.
Welcome.
Yeah, it's very rare, I feel like, for art therapists to engage in virtual reality. So it's really helpful to hear your...
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, Jed, whenever you're ready.
Great, thank you so much. So let me go ahead and try to share my screen here just so I can pull my slides up. And we'll go from there. I'm actually pulling them up on a PDF document rather than going through PowerPoint, just because I find that a little bit easier. But it also helps me kind of like jump through the pages a little bit better. So just a point of clarification that I want to start off with is just that, you know, I'm still in school for art therapy. I'm actually not an art therapist yet on paper. I'm still working on that. But I am in that weird position to where I already have my PhD. And so I have my PhD, I'm a doctor, but I'm also still in school. And somehow that's just the way it goes. And, you know, we kind of take it from there. But my PhD is in what's called media psychology. And I think these two things go hand in hand. I really kind of see that art therapy is how we take, you know, these wellness practices and these digital tools and, you know, things along those lines. And we, you know, work with the one-on-one or the small group setting, you know, and we do interventions and therapy and things like that. And I think that media psychology is kind of like how that extends out into the rest of the world. And so really, when I started my work in media psychology and I started going into it and studying the effects of, you know, these technologies in the population, I just felt like I had to keep going, you know, and I felt like I had to just really combine what I'm learning in media psychology with the art therapy in order to move forward from there and just kind of get a whole picture of what's going on. And that's what led me to digital generativity, or just generativity in general. And that's really kind of where I specialize in. And generativity it's a weird word, but it's really, a lot of times when we talk about generativity, we're talking about the midlife crisis, and we're talking about people, how they overcome the midlife crisis. But when you dig into it, it's a little bit deeper than that too, because everybody has crises throughout their whole entire lives, especially 2-year-olds. And so it kind of extends out to just the extent you're trying to make the world a better place. And it's really Dr. Dan McAdams who's kind of moved forward with this and kind of gone from there. Just a quick note too, I've got 2 slides here that are kind of like the high level academic stuff. Just bear with me, please. I will get through those and then I will go right into the, you know, into the fun stuff. But ultimately, generativity has, you know, it's these really 2 elements. It's trying to make the world a better place, but then it also has a lot to do with that feeling of fulfillment. And I think that that's what we, a lot of people in the world start feeling like they're lacking. And when they feel like they're lacking that sense of personal fulfillment that they have, that's when we kind of hit that negative downward ladder, you know, and we kind of like spiral into, you know, different wellness issues that may pop up. We may exacerbate mental disorders, you know, and really at the heart of a lot of issues, I think we find generativity waiting. So I'm not going to go into any detail on, I just included this little graph here as one of the questionnaires that they kind of go through, where you can see that really ultimately the way that we help people in, you know, overcome those feelings of loss, of ennui, of things along those lines are really by focusing on what's the legacy, you know, what's your personal story, you know, what kind of narrative and meaning are you trying to make with your own life? And that's really, I think, ultimately when you're talking about generativity studies, that's what you're getting at. So where I come into is what's called the PLE, or the personal learning environment. And this goes back to where I started studying in media psychology, just what people are doing when they get online. You know, and because you have a lot of people that talk about how, you know, things like Facebook and, you know, and back in the day it was MySpace, and these days we're talking about virtual reality, about how these things distanced us, you know, and how they drove us apart. And that really was contrary to a lot of my experience, because I was hanging out with a lot of circus performers, and what I would find is that they started off, you know, very much like everybody else, and they started getting online, they started joining Facebook groups, they started interacting with circus performers, and then they ran away to the circus and they became one. you know, and I really just wanted to understand that. I wanted to know what was going on, you know, because these were people that were finding meaning in their lives, and, you know, and building a life of purpose, you know, and going forward from there. And so when you look into the research, what you see is that the big difference is that they had a very strong personal learning environment. And that's, you know, an environment that's crafted out of all these different tools. You can see that we have here, you know, things like not just YouTube videos, you know, where, especially when you're talking about circus performers, there's all kinds of tutorials. Any of you guys want to learn how to breathe fire, just Google the tutorials for it, but please do it safely. And please don't do it while you're in your house under social distancing. Like, that would just not go well. But, you know, what we found is that people were building these, you know, amalgamations of websites and forums and things along those lines. And they were really building themselves an environment in which they could then use to leverage their learning and experience and going from there. And primarily one that helped them feel safe about stepping out into that, you know, that world beyond them. And so when you get into the research behind that, you found what's going on. Satman, he talked about serendipity, you know, and the role of serendipity in creating these personal learning environments. And then Thomas and Brown discussed openness, imagination, and play. And that's where this became really interesting to me, because ultimately, when you're talking about this idea of generativity and this idea of, you know, creating meaning in our lives, what I kept seeing and what I kept coming back to is it was the play, it was the imagination, you know, it was the creativity, you know, that really fostered that. And those were the vehicles that meaning came from. So those were my two big academic slides. And then from there, for me, it was, once I figured out this picture that it's the personal learning environment, you know, and crafting a personal learning environment and using that towards generativity, you know, in order to fill that void, in order to make meaning in our lives, in order to have a sense of purpose when we go to bed at night. You know, what are the fun things that are going on out there? And, you know, that's when I came across virtual reality. And I started learning about grief. And I started learning about, because grief is very much the, you know, is, I don't say the opposite of generativity, but I want to say the, you know, it's definitely something that comes up a lot when we start thinking about our purpose. You know, oftentimes people are thinking about their purpose or thinking about their grief in their life. And so I was studying that, and, you know, that led me to the study of death. And I thought that what I would do for my projects in art therapy was to study how virtual reality and death come together, and what, and how people are using this environment creatively to mourn and to grieve, you know, and to overcome their grief. And then COVID-19 happened. And so suddenly we found ourselves immersed in a situation where individuals were needing to have funerals and needing to grieve and needing to go through, you know, these processes, and they were socially distanced and they weren't able to reach out or even attend the funerals. And so this work became critically important. And so what I found people doing is meeting online and meeting in virtual reality and helping each other out. Sarah mentioned a group that does daily meditation, and they're called Evolve VR. And I think I can just go ahead and, like, I'm going to skip right to that slide and come back to the other one. So they actually do what's called mutual aid work, and they do a lot of it, and they meet almost daily in virtual reality, and they'll get rooms of 40 people or more sometimes, and they'll begin to help each other out and to share experiences and to share tips and tools. And largely it's people that are looking about what they can be doing today in order to help, you know, these issues that are coming up, that are coming from, you know, the pandemic that we're all in right now. And so I was just blown away by that. And that really helped me understand how this process of play is also a process of community, you know? And so right now where you're really seeing that is the words mutual aid. And you can go into Facebook and just Google mutual aid in your hometown, and I guarantee you're gonna find something to pop up, or at least in your country, and you're gonna find something that pops up. And I know the UK in particular has a really widespread and integrated network of mutual aid groups that are out there. And it's the same in the United States, and they're popping up more and more. And I guarantee you we're going to have twice as many a month from now as we do today. So it's not just happening in virtual reality, it's happening all over these networks and these forums. And to me, that goes back down to what I was seeing in my original research, is that people are experiencing grief. And so they're building their personal learning environment by creating all these different tools and all these different environments, and then they're moving forward with that. so just really fast, what this work has gone to so far then is, once I was in the system, I was, how can I best contribute was the question that happened. And so I did a lot of research, and I had a lot of support, especially from, you know, the people in this group. Rosie and Sarah also helped kind of, you know, direct me, answer questions, and go from there. And working with a group of volunteers, we kind of came up with this idea of FFP. We knew all of these mutual aid groups were out there. They were there to do the hands-on support. They were the groups that people trusted. They were what people were looking at. And so our role wasn't to be that. Our role was to help give those people tools. And so we're talking about psychoeducation at that point. And really, the biggest question that we were seeing was loss of life, and what to do when people experience loss of life, and how do they handle their grief in that way. And so that's where we developed this idea of FFP, which stands for feel, find, and plan. Because the way that I assumed is, if online, if I'm giving these people tools, and those tools have maybe 2 seconds to, you know, to give to somebody, to hand to people to go from there. If they want one thing that they're going to remember, remembering FFP is the way to go. And that's encouraging people to go ahead and feel their feelings, telling them to find their network of support and the people who are there to be able to support them through their problems, and then creating a recovery plan. And I'll go ahead and post the link on that too, but we created a document that has some research and some resources for people out there also. So that has been my work so far. And I don't know how I'm doing on time. I think I'm doing well. But really at the end of the day, I think generativity is play. It's playing, you know, it's playing in our communities, it's playing at home. And, you know, play is what brings meaning in our lives. So I think that's it for me. I hope I did 10 minutes. I don't know. Sarah, how are we looking?
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you so much, Jed. And what a lovely, spot to end the presentations on. That was, fascinating. Just, I think the diversity of ways that we can use virtual reality and technology, and approaching it from very different perspectives of if it's academic or healthcare or as independent practitioners as well. So we've got a few minutes left for any questions. So if anyone does have any questions, then feel free to just pop it in the Q&A section, which you can find at the bottom of the screen. But first of all, if any of the panelists have any questions or things they want to raise after seeing everybody else's presentations.
See, there's a question in the Q&As already.
So Leslie Deer says, what are some good ways to measure the effectiveness of VR therapies, questionnaires or other methods?
I'll take that very briefly. Just when we did our work, obviously it's really important with any of this that we are gathering evidence and data and we're able to show this stuff works. I think early on there was a lot of qualitative research and there's a lot of just anecdotal things. Like we found just showing this to people, even if they don't understand what you're talking about, people will see the impact of it and understand there's something to do with it. In terms of when we did our study, for example, that one was very simple. We just did some biometrics. We started with, I think we didn't end up using blood pressure all the way through, but we did blood pressure and heart rate for some biometric measures. And then we did a before and after survey of emotional state. So we had trait and state emotions. So what someone is like in their day-to-day life and how they're feeling on that particular day. You know, it might have been that they've had a particularly stressful session with a client, something like that. And then, so that was literally just kind of like a scale 1 to 7, how someone was feeling on that. I think it really depends on what it is that you're trying to achieve with the VR, what you're going to measure, how you're going to measure that. So, I mean, a lot of it is going to be self-reported from the person using it. So, for example, with the Sheffield Hallam work, you know, to do with pain reduction, you can quite easily measure. Someone previously would have had X amount of their opioid, for example, and now they don't need it. So you can kind of easily do those sorts of measures. I don't know, Jed or Sarah, if you've got any other thoughts on that particularly.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit. I guess there's, you know, a variety of different ways that we can measure effectiveness, and it just really depends on what you are measuring. There's definitely, things like biometrics that you can integrate. but also just, you know, how people are interacting with experiences as well. There's a researcher called Jack Brooks, who I believe is at, I can't remember which university, but he's definitely in Leeds, that's created the Unity experimental framework, where you can actually run your own randomized control trials through Unity, which is a games engine that lots of VR developers use. So that can be really helpful. Also in our previous webinar with Joannika, who's one of my collaborators on Deep, then she talks about best practices for integrating biofeedback into virtual reality experiences for mental health as well. And I guess the other thing to really consider is how you protect this data, because at the moment it is very unregulated, and especially if you're doing things outside of an academic department, you really need to think about, you know, how you ensure patient data is protected. Jeremy Bailenson from Stanford Human Interaction Lab writes a really good paper on protecting non-verbal data in VR, so I definitely recommend checking that out as well. I'll put a link to that in the chat. Does anyone else have any other comments they'd like to add there? And then Patricia's also asked a question. Has anyone looked into research with the concern of combination of psychedelics and VR, or their similarities on mental health? Yeah, I saw that Rosie, you've added a little bit there about the Cyberdelic Society. Yeah, that's a huge area. Sorry, I'll let you jump in.
I mean, it's very big, and it's quite difficult in the UK in terms of the legalities of these sort of things. So it's hard for that many people to be studying psychedelics. There are, in other countries, I think there's some slightly more flexible. Obviously over here, people in universities are allowed to use psychedelics for research purposes. I can't think off the top of my head, but I'll pop in some links. Maybe I think we'll probably send out some links later on. I would check out a film called Dosed, which was a documentary which was produced, which is about psychedelics used as therapy. It was very short, like they did limited runs in cinemas. Every time was sold out. It's the kind of thing that makes you watch it and go, why on earth are we not doing more with this in a more formal, structured, clinical way? I would check that film out, but I'll try and come up with some more links which I can include there. But there's a lot of research starting to happen in that, yeah.
And the other people, oh, sorry, just to add very quickly, sorry. The other thing worth checking out is the Awakened Futures Summit, which is run by a group called Consciousness Hacking that look at the future of psychedelics, technology and meditation. And it's led by a guy called Mikey Siegel, who's based at Stanford as well. It's doing some really interesting work around biofeedback, psychedelics and VR. Go ahead, Jed.
I was just going to say, in the United States, we have the organization called MAPS, and MAPS is the one that is, you know, has the documentation and the regulation and the approval to do the research in psychedelics. I think, to be honest, I think the area that actually lags behind isn't the research in psychedelics, it's the research in virtual reality. And I think that before we could even begin to integrate the two, you know, I'm sure there are people who have plans and ideas out there, but we really need to see an escalation in the research around VR and come up with some tactical methods on how the VR is going to interact with the psychedelics.
Just checking some other questions. So we have a question from Lance Phillips. Oh, no, he's saying, oh no. Reading the wrong bit. Chris Blackmore says, how long do people need to settle into a VR session before they're ready to do therapeutic work? And also, how do you end a session in a safe way? For example, is there any decompression time? And if so, for how long?
Do you want to answer that, Matteo? Oh, you're muted, Matteo.
Sorry, yes. So it really depends. First of all, thanks for the question, Chris. It's actually a very good one. And yes, I think it's very important sometimes to decompress, and as well sometimes to inform what's going to happen in the VR before actually trying it. And there is no like a straight answer for this. There is every session, VR, no VR, you will have to kind of bear in mind that you have to come to an end at some point, and it will be potentially traumatic for the clients to leave, even if it's just one session. So I would really more effort in the preparation aspect and in the sorts of helping the person, guiding slowly the person in and out. And yeah, thank you.
And I think, can I just say very briefly as well, I think quite often what's the time that's missed? Obviously, Matteo's talking about that in the more sort of formal clinical art therapy way, but just broadly, like any time that you're using VR with anybody, and the more vulnerable they are, the more important I think this is the time when someone takes the headset off. You'll find almost without fail, even if you're not doing this as like therapy in a sort of formal sense, people will just talk at you. When they've got the headset on, they want to tell you what they're seeing, like they just get chatty. But the time when they take the headset off is like such a prime sort of rich time to have a really, really great conversation with somebody where they don't feel like they're opening up, you know, it's just very natural. And that can be such a great time to really kind of get the most out of things. You know, they might have been playing a game or something as their VR experience, but that point is quite often the time when people are then, if you're trying to whiz people through, for example, and they get their VR and then they get chucked on and the next person comes and has their turn, it's really abrupt. Like Matteo says, like you're completely lost. When this is going well in VR, you're completely in that world and it's wonderful and you're completely immersed, and that's what's so brilliant in it. And if you aren't brought out of that in a gentle way, it can be actually actively really, really horrible. But you can turn that into such a great thing, is like just allowing enough time there that you aren't trying to hurry people through. Like every time when we did our workshops and things, I would always rather have fewer people who had the time to do that right than saying we've ticked a box of having 30 people through today. If they haven't had the right type of experience and they haven't come away feeling kind of calm at the end, having decompressed.
Yes.
Just really fast, if I can jump in there too. One of the best things that I can say to any type of clients that I'm working with in the VR session is that it's okay to take off the headset.
Yeah.
And I think just, you know, establishing just those safe practices to begin with is the first step.
I think there's so much here. I think we could go on for almost hours. I think it's fascinating to see all the things that all the attendees are up to as well. And it's just been so great watching the chat and just seeing people that are doing things around immersive soundscapes and exploring psychedelics, and it's such a vast world. I guess that's what makes it so interesting, is that this is such an interdisciplinary space. Like virtual reality is as a medium in itself, but I think, you know, who is drawn to even the healthcare applications. And it's definitely, you know, all these opportunities for people to work together that we really need to foster. And so I feel like this is a lovely, rare opportunity to explore that. And thank you so much to Barclays Eagle Labs for helping this make this happen as well. It's been such a pleasure to run all of these events with you the last few years. And I think the best bit about it is actually the community and all the conversations that usually happens afterwards. So so it's nice that we have the chat, and I know some people have asked about opportunities to share best practice as well. Jen, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add about all the things that you guys are doing at the moment.
Yeah, no, it's been a really great session. Thank you to all the fellow panelists. I think there's definitely opportunity for us to have follow-up events. I think, like from the conversations and the Q&A that's come through, there's a lot more appetite for us to continue to do these, and we're very supportive of doing that as well. We've seen, you know, the immersive space, particularly in health tech, grow so much over the last 18 months, and I think in particular even more so around how arts and wellbeing just link. And we ran an event obviously in January, didn't we, Sarah, around financial links to financial, physical and mental wellbeing. So I think people, particularly corporates, you know, are starting to finally understand that this is a real importance for employees as well. So I think it's a really good opportunity now, even more so from the pandemic, where we're all able to still communicate virtually, which is great, but there's obviously going to be some impacts of this as well. So yeah, no, really great, and be really happy to be involved in some more ones in the future.
Thank you.
Sounds wonderful. Yeah, and with that as well, I guess we haven't really discussed it at all, but I think it's really interesting how virtual reality could potentially link to this idea of arts on prescription, and how you can go to a doctor and be referred on to somebody who's called a link worker that's able to have more of a holistic discussion with you about what's going on in your life from a financial and emotional perspective, as well as, you know, the medical perspective as well, and can prescribe arts-based experiences that, you know, it's a form of preventative care. And I think that's what's important to really acknowledge here, that we can use digital tools and technologies, and analog ones as well, as a way of caring for ourselves before perhaps things can get a little bit worse. So it'll be interesting to see if there is a future where potentially a doctor would prescribe you virtual reality.
I absolutely think it is. I don't see how that isn't going to happen.
Funny enough, though, I was been speaking with a global but also UK health retailer, and they've identified a number of challenges. I think they might be looking to do some form of accelerator, but pain without pills is one of their top key priorities, pain relief without pills. So yeah, I agree. I think there's going to be a huge opportunity with that.
That's huge. Do we have to stop, or can we keep chatting?
I did ask if we can run over, so we can run over a little bit more. I am conscious of everyone's time, but if there is anything,
I was just going to briefly say on that point with Kay Smith, who's a patient advocate that we know, who's massive advocate for VR. She's in palliative care, and she's been using VR in all sorts of different ways, and basically did this beautiful speech about how it changed her life and how everyone should be using it with their patients if they're able to. And we were speaking to her because she's joining a panel we're doing on Monday where we're talking about the patient perspective on this, and we're actually getting patients to come and present rather than it being focused on us. And when we were talking to her about it yesterday, she was saying her headset didn't break. It was because she had a Samsung Gear and they've stopped for it. And she said she suddenly realized now how much she depended on that for pain relief, because she was using that like all the time as a kind of day-to-day way to relieve her pain at home. And that is like, I mean, when you're talking about people prescribing this, that is so cheap. Like an Oculus Go headset, new now, costs about £130. And if you think what it costs to prescribe somebody pain medication and all of the side effects that come along with that, and if they're able to get 60% of the pain relief by just putting a headset on, that's absolutely huge. And there is increasing evidence on this. There is tons of it, and if anyone's interested, we've got a huge Zotero database of papers written on all sorts of things like this. But it's when you kind of see this happening, it's just like, it's mad that it's not happening more. It's just that obviously it just takes time to get things in through medical clinical applications.
Absolutely. And one thing I also wanted to ask the panelists as well is, whilst all these technologies are wonderful, the problem is that obviously lots of people do not have access to headsets, much like Kay's problem at the moment. And so do you have any suggestions for tangible ways that people can support their well-being at the moment, especially arts-based experiences?
Yeah, there is many ways you can do from art. I know there are some Zoom meeting going on, some live drawings going on. I can share the links later on, of course. And I personally also like to work with plants as well, which is another form of arts, and everything that really nourish your soul in a way. It's very important, and sometimes I know it's really difficult for everyone, but now with the lockdown, we have a chance to learn new skills, to learn new things, to learn new hobby, and technology can actually help us a lot. It's helping me a lot. So I really encourage you to try and to play as much as you can with many different tools that you find, and yeah.
Also, just make the point that not all VR has to be in a VR headset. We're looking a lot at web VR at the moment, so things like Mozilla Hubs and AltSpace and all of those sort of things. Like, it's brilliant. If you've got a VR headset, you can go in. But actually, it was with Sarah and Jed. I think, yeah, it was Jed. We were having a call a couple of weeks ago. They were both in their VR headsets in AltSpace. I was running a bit late. I had a glass of wine. I couldn't really be bothered to get my my Quest out. So I just hopped on my mobile phone and sat there, and I was able to interact with something where both of them were in their proper VR headsets. I still had a great experience of that. I could still move around them. I could do things, drop my video in. I could pull in objects, do all of the same sorts of things. It was still really engaging for me. I still completely felt like I was having a really cool social experience, which was a lot better than, us having another sort of Zoom type chat that we have a lot. And that was really striking for me, actually, because I almost always will go in a VR headset because I've got one. But it was actually great that I was like literally just click a couple of links. You don't have to create an account. You don't have to have any kit. Everybody has got a smartphone these days. And it's literally as simple as click a couple of buttons and you're in. And I was in a world that these guys were experiencing in full VR. And what's cool about that is when we're talking to clients now as well, when we talk about whether this is with the NHS or with like a corporate commercial client, it doesn't mean you've got to develop one thing for now and then in 6 months or a year, or however long, when you decide you are ready to look at VR, redevelop everything again. It means you can start right now, and I could set up a Mozilla Hubs room literally while we're talking now, and in a couple of minutes we could all be in there and all be experiencing it together. Like, that's astounding. Like the how things have moved forwards. Like, I'm not a developer. I don't do the coding stuff myself, but for that kind of thing, I can turn around a prototype in 2 minutes, like literally. Like, that's what's amazing about the accessibility of that from the creative side as well. It's not limited to people who've got tons of money. Like, anybody can go on and use the software that's built into Hubs and make their own worlds like today, and you don't need to be techie. And I think that's what's exciting about this, is it opens it up to a huge, huge audience for not only the people viewing it, but actually the creators as well. It's not nearly as exclusive anymore. So chat for your well-being, build worlds in VR because you can.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I think we've run over more than perhaps we should. So I think that seems like a very nice place to end it. Thank you so much, everyone, again, Matteo, Jed, Jen, Rosie.
Thank you.
And all the KTN team and Immerse UK team that are behind the scenes that work really, really hard to do this. Anita, who has facilitated all of this as well. Thank you so, so much. And we'll hopefully be back for some more events soon.
Will we get the will we get any info on the people who were here? Because I keep seeing really interesting things popping up in the chat, and I'd really love to hear more about the people who were watching as well, because it seems like there's some brilliant stuff going on.
I'm sure we can find a way if people consent to that. I know that people have been sharing their information in the chat as well, so we can follow up with that afterwards. But yeah, otherwise, if you want to about it, that's a good way for us to also stay in touch. If you use the hashtag Immersive Health UK on Twitter, I think that's a really nice way to connect as well. I'll just put that in the chat as well. Immersive Health UK. Yeah, helpful way to connect.
I'll definitely reach out to anybody who uses that hashtag on Twitter. So yeah, that'd be great.
Lovely. And yes, and follow Immerse UK on Twitter as well. And Barclays Eagle Labs. And all of us. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Good night.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.